Hello YouTube and welcome to this new short lore video. Today we're talking about Yokuda. This video was not requested, but I felt like I had to deal with this subject anyway, since under several videos of mine people comment things about Yokuda being completely destroyed and other people saying it's not destroyed and that it's actually still prosperous. Now clearly we're not all on the same level of knowledge on the subject, so let us make this video to make sure we're all on the same level. Enjoy! So to get us all on the same page, let's recap the story of Yokuda for a moment. To the west of Tamriel lies another great continent, the continent of Yokuda. We don't know exactly how Yokuda came into existence. The most commonly accepted theory is that it was actually once part of Tamriel. It was basically ripped away from Tamriel during the El Wars in the Dawn era, which would explain how the Red Guards who came from Yokuda also come from the El but more on that in my video on genetics. However, I wish to note there are also people that say that the origin of Yokuda is way more metaphysical. However, I have not seen evidence for any of these theories in the games, nor am I well versed enough in these fan theories to give my take on them. So if you want to know more, give it a Google. I am not qualified enough to tell you about them, unfortunately. Anyway, back to Yokuda. Yokuda was a very bad place to live, since it was basically one big barren desert according to the sources that we have. There were also some mountain ridges, and if anything I think it must also have had some tropical regions near the coast and some more fertile river valleys to be able to sustain its population, as we know that Yokuda was actually inhabited and had quite a lot of people living on it. Yokuda was inhabited by their native Yokudans, a race of men, and by the left-handed elves or the Sinistral elves, another race of Mer. These two races did not go very well along, and ultimately the left-handed elves ended up being extinct. This, was either caused by the actions of the Yokudans, so the ancestors of the Red Guards, or by the later happenings in the disaster of Yokuda, or a combination of the two. Anyway, the Yokudans and the left-handed elves lived there with their own cultures and customs. There were several kingdoms on Yokuda throughout the ages and even a Yokudan empire. According to the Imperial records that we have now, it was actually quite a sophisticated land with their own politics and not just a continent filled with barbarians and small tribes. However, just before the year 800 of the First Era, Yokuda apparently sunk below the sea. The entire continent sunk below the sea. What caused this? Well, we have no idea. Pocket Guide to the Empire, the lore book that came with Oblivion's Collector's Edition, literally states that we don't know what caused it. People actually debate over whether it was a series of natural disasters. According to the book, the continent already saw frequent natural disasters like earthquakes, so it wouldn't be too weird of a thought. Other people actually say it was a band of Red Guards losing the then civil war and basically using their magic, their stone magic, to enact revenge upon all of the island by just having it sunk. And then there are other fan theories who give it a more metaphysical explanation, but I am not really well versed enough in the metaphysics of the Elder Scrolls lore to explain it to you, and I simply don't know enough about the matter. I'm sorry. No matter what caused the sinking, this was pretty bad, the whole disaster, since basically all of Yokuda was gone at this point. In earlier centuries, the Red Guards had fled Yokuda for different reasons and landed in Hammerfell, and eventually these people would become the Red Guards, so the Yokudan customs and the people actually survived in the Red Guards. However, now we arrive at a crossroads in the fandom. People keep telling me, Zork, there is no more Yokuda. And other people tell me, Zork, no, don't listen to them, Yokuda still exists. So, which one is it then? Well, most people seem to assume, at least the vocal majority seems to assume, that Yokuda is completely gone. Well, that's not true, because Yokuda is actually still very much there. While the games might not acknowledge it in the main stories or even in the quests, side information shows that Yokuda, at least in some form, is still active and inhabited. Most prominently, this is actually found in the dialogue of someone we find in Oblivion, in the city of Anvil, a man called Ulfgar Fogeye, who actually acknowledges Yokuda in his dialogue. He literally says, Ships sail from Anvil Harbour for ports of call in Hammerfell, Somerset Isles, Yokuda and the Western Isles. So first of all, there's a Yokuda, and second, it's actually still inhabited apparently. Why else would ships go there? So now that we know that Yokuda actually still exists, we can also know, well, what current Yokuda looks like. It looks like this. This map, on which we see current day Yokuda, comes actually directly from one of the games. Well, actually one of the lesser known games. The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, the game that came before Morrowind. What we see is not much of a continent, but more of an island archipelago, or an island group for our non-native English speakers. Most people assume that this whole area is what is left of Yokuda, and that the continent may have been much bigger, like the size of all of Tamriel. Others actually theorize that this is just what is left of Yokuda, and that these islands here are actually completely different islands that have been there all along at the coast of Yokuda. On those topics we can only guess, as we don't know much about what Yokuda looked like before its demise. I mean, it might have been that there was never even a disaster, and that what has been Yokuda all along are these islands, and that Redguard tradition may have seemed it bigger. I mean, who knows? I personally think that this is not a very likely story, and I don't think there was actually someone who made this up, and I actually think there was a big disaster on Yokuda, and that Yokuda was actually way bigger at first. But what its size was, we don't know. It could be that all the island groups we see here were all Yokuda. It could even be that the islands we see here, the islands of Kruska and maybe even more to the south, were all part of Yokuda at one point. But, well, we don't really know about any of it. But now that we're sure that there's actually islands left, what does this modern Yokuda look like? Well, again, we don't know. While a couple of books, like the first edition of the Pocket Note of the Empire Guide, at some point actually acknowledges that Yokuda is still existing in some form, nothing is mentioned in this book of climate or even telling us of the interactions that the islands had with Tamriel. The only hint that we have at contact with Tamriel is actually from that NPC from Oblivion, Ulfgar. He tells us that ships are still sailing there, so there is still some form of contact. So at least we know that trade or maybe even human transport is still happening between Yokuda and Tamriel. But then again, if they would include this in dialogue and apparently acknowledge that Yokuda still exists, why don't we see any Yokudan immigrants, or why don't we hear anything of Yokuda in the games? I mean, if you look at the map, it's not that far away from Tamriel. From the limited knowledge that we have, we must conclude that contact between Tamriel and Yokuda is pretty limited. As for modern day Yokuda, I would have think, well, it probably developed itself into 2 or even more separate nations. Because it developed itself apparently completely separate from Tamriel with very limited contact, a bit like the Romans and the Chinese. I mean, they had knowledge of each other, and they apparently had 2 trips, or no, even more trips, I don't really remember, to each other. But they don't really influence each other's development. I think actually that the island group that we see here is made up of either 2, as I said before, or multiple kingdoms, or nations. I think this is because the 2 island groups are divided by the Sea of Pearls, and because there's so limited contact between Tamriel and Yokuda, I would assume that, well, Yokuda is not very strong, or at least not very developed, and probably not strong enough to maintain control of the islands. So, if I had to guess, this is either 2 big island kingdoms or several small island kingdoms. But in the end it comes down to that I don't know, and that there's no canon information on the matter. The most contact with the outside world that they probably have is either with Thras, if it still exists, and if they have contact it probably won't be friendly, or another prospect would be that they have contact with the Western Islands, as Ulfgar calls them. And on the Western Islands I actually did a video 2 days ago, so check that one out if you want to know more. With that said, we have actually reached the end of this video and basically everything that we know about modern day Yokuda. If you liked it, let me know by hitting like, subscribing, and if you want to be notified of new lore videos, click the bell icon, because subscribing no longer means that you get someone's videos, even though that's the definition of subscribing. But yeah, YouTube. If you want to support me in a more personal way, check out my Patreon in the description. You get your name at the end of every video and some more awesome side content. Also, if you want personal contact with me, my Discord and Instagram are in the description, and I will see you all in the next lore video. Well, by the way, should I continue doing the meme at the end of every video? No idea if anyone even sees them anymore. I really like the Elder Scrolls memes at the end of every video, but let me know what you think by, well, using the word longsword in your comment to prove that you actually came this far in the video, and tell me what you think about the memes. I'll see you all later. Bye bye.